Hi, grade 8, it's me, your teacher. So the last time I saw you, we spoke about a closed compound. We spoke about how the conditions were like on the closed compound, what is a closed compound, etc., etc. And for homework, I gave you activity 3, where you had to compare the two sources and then write down the answers. Now, usually if we were in a physical classroom, we would go through this together, but since we're not, you just need to now open up your books on the homework and just mark according to what I'm going to give you the answers now. Unfortunately, I can't type them out because I didn't type them out in the slideshow. So you're just going to have to listen really carefully and compare my answers to yours. Please keep in mind that if your answer is not exactly the same as mine, it doesn't mean it's wrong. As long as it contains the key words, you are on the right track. So firstly, let's have a look at the word question 1. Just give me a moment. Okay, apologies about that. My doggy has just decided to cause a little bit of ruckus. Right, so let's have a look at question 1. Explain the term closed compound. The answer to that question is very simple. It is a housing unit where they sent the people to live that worked on the mines. So a housing unit that was close to the mines where the workers or the miners could live. Anything like that, if you have anything similar to that, you can give yourself the mark. Then if you look at question 2, use source C. 2.1, does the author have a positive or negative view of the closed compound? So let's go back to source C quickly. Black miners were restricted to closed compounds. Workers were locked up in the new compounds without their families for between 3 and 6 months, surrounded by metal and wire fencing. So, just reading that, do you think that is a positive or a negative view? If you answered negative, you would be correct. Then, 2.2, explain your answer, and this is very important, using evidence from the source. So what we need to do, we need to go to the source and extract a sentence or a phrase from the source that shows me that this person has a negative view of the closed compounds. So you could perhaps say, workers were locked up. The word locked up tells us that this is very negative. It's bad to be locked up. You could have also said that the workers were kept naked in solitary confinement. That is also a very negative thing. You can say that they were restricted to the closed compounds, also very negative. So just keep in mind that these are just suggestions. You can use any word or phrase that points to this author's opinion of the closed compounds negatively. Okay, now let's have a look at question 3. Study source D. 3.1. Does the author have a positive or negative view of the closed compound? So let's go to it quickly. For most workers, the compounds offered great advantages. Here they received proper housing, were well fed, could buy items. So you kind of get the sense that this is positive. So then let's have a look at 3.2. Let's find our evidence from the source that shows that this is a positive. So you can say, the compounds offered great advantages. An advantage is a good thing, so this can be a positive view of the closed compounds. You can also write down that they received proper housing, they were well fed, they could buy items. Anything that shows that living in the compounds wasn't that bad, it was very good living for them. This person is taking a positive approach. So use all the sources to describe the living conditions in the compounds. Now, when I saw you last year, we spoke about the PEEL format, which basically stands for point, explain, example, and link. So what we're going to do now is we are going to construct a paragraph to describe the living conditions in the compounds. Just hold on for me for a moment. Okay, so what I've done is I've pulled up a document where we are going to write this paragraph together. So this is usually how I teach writing the PL format, is we would make a little table and then we'd write point, explain, example, and link. So the question was asking us to describe the living conditions in the closed compounds. So let's have a look at our point. Now our point can also be called a topic sentence. It is one sentence to tell me what the paragraph is about. And the easiest way to write this is just basically to repeat the question as an answer. So if the question was, describe the conditions in the closed compounds, then our point will be, there were many positive and negative aspects when living in a closed compound. So that's one sentence that tells me what the paragraph will be about. If our reader was to read that, they would know that we're going to be talking about the positives and the negatives of living in a closed compound. So now let's explain. So let's have a look. To explain, we need to go to our sources. So our sources tells us that black miners were restricted. That's from source C. It tells us that workers were locked up. It tells me that they worked for about 3 to 6 months. It tells me that they were kept alone and that their hands were locked in a boxing glove. And then the other source tells me that the workers got proper housing, were well fed, could buy items, they received proper treatment, and they were given lessons in reading and writing. So what we need to do is we just need to take that from the sources and put it in our own words. So we would write, some of the negative conditions were, and then we just list out the negative conditions. Workers were not allowed to leave the compound. We could say that some of them were kept naked in solitary confinement. Okay? And then we'd also write about the positives conditions. So then we could say, but there were also benefits such as receiving housing and getting food. Now we go to, for our example, we need to actually go to the sources and then we just quote what the sources say. So I always tell my kids, if you don't know how to start the sentence, you can start with, for example. Then the person who reads it knows exactly that the next thing you're going to list is going to be the examples. In the source, it says, workers were locked up, surrounded by metal and wire fencing. And then in brackets, we can just write the phrase C, because that tells me this information is coming from source C. And it also says, I'm putting this in because it's not directly from the source, but it's implied. Workers could buy items such as blankets, shoes, and clothing at fair prices. And then in brackets, I'm just going to write D, so I know that information is coming from source D. Right, so there's our two examples. And now we can go to our link. Our link is basically like a little conclusion. So we would write, this proves that there were both good and bad aspects of living in the closed compounds. Alright, so now we've compiled a little paragraph So what we're going to do now is we are actually going to look at this as a paragraph, because in the exam, I don't want you to put it in this table format. You have to write it as one continuous paragraph of about 80 words. So let's quickly just sort this out. So I'll show you, this is how it's supposed to look. Okay, so now you can see over here, this is how the paragraph will look at the end if you were to write it as an answer in the exam. So you'll see it's about 98 words long. You can obviously make this shorter, but let's have a look how it should be constructed. There were many positive and negative aspects when living in a closed compound. Some of the negative conditions were workers were not allowed to leave the compound. Some of them were kept naked in solitary confinement. But there were also benefits, such as receiving housing and getting food. For example, in the source it says, workers were locked up, surrounded by metal and wire fencing. See. And it also says workers could buy items such as blankets, shoes, and clothing at fair prices. D. This proves that there were both good and bad aspects of living in the closed compounds. So do you see how that compiles a complete paragraph that follows the Peel format: point, explain, example, and link? So that gives us an end to the answers for activity 3. I can't believe it took a whole lesson to do that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to leave you on a few discussion questions, a few things just to think about before we go to the next lesson. Why were the black men kept in the compounds? Why do you think, instead of them traveling from where they came from, did the mine owners decide to build these massive buildings with the wire fences to keep the black men in these compounds? Why? Just think of maybe about 1 or 2 reasons why they would do this instead of letting people travel from one place to another. And the next discussion question I'd like you to think about is, how do you think living in the compounds would affect black men? How would it make them feel? How would it make them, would it improve their lives? Would it make their lives worse? What do you think? Give it a few moments, think about it, write down 1 or 2 ideas that pop into your head. And then we'll discuss this when you guys come back to school, Right, so then on the D6, I've uploaded a document that has all the activities in. Your homework for this lesson is to do activity 4, which is the visual sources. You don't need to do any of the other activities because we've already done activity 1, 2, and 3. We just finished now. Your next homework is activity 4, which means you have to look at a picture and write down what you see in that picture. The next time I see you, we'll speak about further land dispossession and the defeat of the African kingdoms, the Xhosa in 1878, the Pedi and the Zulu in 1879, and how the British planned to strengthen their position in Southern Africa during this time. Because keep in mind, Southern Africa is where all the gold is, where all the diamonds are, and the problem is there's people living there, the Xhosa, the Pedi, and the Zulu, and they need those people gone in order to establish mines. So we'll speak about that in the next lesson. I hope this lesson was very informative to you and you learned something about source analysis, which is a vital skill in history that you will take all the way to grade 12 and beyond. I'll see you next time. Bye bye.